Another week, another exciting episode. In our new retro games reviews, we bring you the amazing Project Horizon for Commodore Amiga, an action-adventure out of this world. Demon Pages for the ZX Spectrum 128K is next, and it's an incredible and addictive action RPG that will enchant both you and your Specky. Last new game review is for the Spider Maze 2, a well-made, smart, quick arcade game for your Commodore 64. Our hardware review this week, as promised in our short videos, examines a wonderful add-on for the Apple II series of computers, the Smart Disk 2, that will make running your games on the system a breeze. The DOS Vault presents the simply incredible remake of the classic ZX Spectrum game, Rex, and remembers the forefather of FPS's 3D Catacombs, id Software's first serious attempt at a modern FPS engine. In our retro adventures, we experience the creepy, spooky, and macabre atmosphere of Aching, a classic graphic and text adventure reminiscent of Sierra Online's early hits. In our Retrospect adventure game, we replay the funniest, linear, and graphically spectacular classic LucasArts game, Monkey Island 2: LeChuck's Revenge. Finally, our history lesson dives into the interesting and complicated story of an attempt by a visionary to unify the gaming world that ended up in utter failure. We investigate the story of the 3DO. So, kick back your shoes, sit comfortably, and let's get this show started. Welcome to this week's new retro games reviews, and we begin with Project Horizon, a top-down shooter for the Amiga Commodore computer. You will need an Amiga equipped with ECS or AGA graphics chipsets and at least 2 MB of RAM to run this game, but believe me, it's really worth it. The game is made by Electric Black Sheep, and the story is in an alternate timeline. We are in 1977, you are a NASA astronaut, and you find yourself in the midst of an alien invasion to the man's first colony on the moon. Now, the first thing that you will notice after the truly amazing intro is that the game packs some serious graphics. This game reminds me more of a console game like Sega Mega Drive or Super NES than an Amiga. The graphics are colorful, the animation is amazing, and the environments are so well designed, well, you'll be inclined to believe that the game is actually running on some sort of powered hardware. Now, the gameplay will remind you of Alien Breed and Commando, or rather a combination of the two. And it's true that it draws elements from both of them, but it has its own character. Plus, the game has a story, and you get to uncover clues about what happened to the base and how to defeat the alien invaders. The controls are truly amazing. Your character can move in 8 different directions, and along with him goes the scrolling, which is very smooth and fast. You have 2 buttons, in fact, that you can utilize, something that doesn't happen a lot in Amiga games. With one you get to shoot, and the other one you get to throw a grenade. The music and sound effects are also of very high standards. This is a game with extremely high production values. It's addictive, it's fun, and you'll definitely definitely get addicted to it. Now, onto the rankings, and the graphics receive a 9.5. The controls a 9.2. The music and sound effects a 9.1. And the gameplay a 9.3, for a total of 9.3, and, as expected, the title of the Game of the Week. Project Horizon is as much an addictive, fun game as it is a technical marvel for the Amiga. We recommend you get right to it. It's one of the best games to come to the Amiga platform in the past few years. Our next game is Demon Pages for the ZX Spectrum 128K model. Now, you play as a sorceress, and you have to collect 9 pages of the grimoire and free the sorcerers of Beardopolis. Now, the game is actually an action RPG for the ZX Spectrum, and a damn good one at that. The graphics, as you can see, are colorful and wonderfully designed with a minimum color class. You get to interact with various characters, you get to speak to them, and of course you can cast deadly spells to vanquish your enemies. But be careful, each spell costs mana, and that is not endless. You can retrieve mana by buying it on shops, or sometimes you can find mana scattered throughout the stages. Now, in order to buy mana or other items, you need to collect coins that you will find scattered again in the environment or by defeating at least 3 enemies. But every time you lose health, the monsters steal some coins from you. Now, this is a very fun game, and along with the wonderful graphics, there is a very, very good soundtrack that accompanies the game and sufficiently good sound effects. The controls are simple and very well implemented. The game is fun, and even though sometimes it's a bit tougher than it should, it's still an addictive game. Now, as we mentioned before, the graphics and the animation is excellent, and there is minimum color class, but it does happen from time to time, but in a way that I personally did not find intrusive or annoying. Besides, it's part of the ZX Spectrum's character. Now, this game mixes various styles of gameplay and various genres, and that is something that we're not used to seeing in a machine such as the ZX Spectrum, and that makes the game a bit more special. On to the rankings now, and the graphics receive a 9.1. The controls a 9. The music and sound effects a 9 as well. And the gameplay an 8.7. For a total of 8.9. Demon Pages is an excellent action RPG, very well made and very addictive. Sometimes it does get a bit rough around the edges, but that doesn't change the fact that it's one of the finest new additions to the ZX Spectrum library, and a game that we definitely recommend you give it a go. Our last new retro game review for this week is Spider Maze 2 by Richard of TND for the Commodore 64. Now this game initially will look to you as a very simple collecting gems style game, and a very easy one at that. But give it some time and you'll find that this is a very smartly designed game that becomes increasingly more difficult, or rather challenging, the more you move on to the stages. Now, the goal of our character, Frederick, is to collect all the diamonds in its maze. But that maze is also inhabited by dangerous spiders that has been summoned by the Spider King with the intent to stop Frederick. Now, the more you advance in the stages, like I said, the more erratic and unpredictable the paths that the spiders take becomes. And at a certain point, you will feel that you are actually the prey for the spiders, as they seem to anticipate your every move. The mazes also vary from very simple mazes into really complicated areas, and each wrong turn will lead to a sudden death. The graphics are pretty good, of course, because of the theme of the game. They're not something very special, but the colors are nice, the characters are cute, and the animation is sufficient. The music, though, is excellent, as are the special effects. The controls, as expected, are really simple, but we have to notice here that the collision detection is excellent, and that is very important in a game like this, as any problems with it would have rendered the game unfair, and that would mean that the game would stop being fun. Now this is a game that starts out simple, like we said, but hides beneath it a very deep and rewarding experience. Let's move on to the rankings, and the graphics receive an 8.1. The controls, a 9. The music and sound effects, a 9.2. And the gameplay, a 9 as well, for a total of 8.8. Spider Maze 2 is an excellent, fast, and smart game, and we definitely recommend you add it to your collection. You will not regret it, as it will offer you hours of fun and a very smart challenge. Welcome to this week's hardware review. As promised in our shorts, this week we have something special for all the Apple II lovers. This is the new Smart Disk 2 Apple II interface. It works on all systems, including Apple IIe, Apple II Plus, Apple II GS and Apple IIc, the model we have here. I must mention here that Apple IIc, even though it wasn't so well received on the market when it came out, it's one of my personal favorite systems. Now, I have installed the interface internally here. What I did was I disconnected the ribbon from the internal floppy drive, and I connected this instead. The device is self-sufficient in in power needs. It does have an additional USB power supply here, should it be needed, and it's right here along the SD card slot, but I found that the power provided through the ribbon width the Apple IIc is more than enough to function the device, which is very simple and very good in its function. Other than that, there is, I think, an interface, an external interface to connect it to the floppy port. If you have a different model, you're good to go that way. But for me, I didn't want to, have cables hanging out, so I did it this way. Now, we're gonna go and see how the system forms and how it works with this. I must let you know at this point that this is the American version of Apple IIc. No, let me rephrase this more correctly. This is the European version, but as you know, for those of you who knows, there is a thing where the Apple IIc and some other models output a black and white signal when connected to PAL monitors. I do have an adapter on the way, but to be honest, I was too impatient to wait for the adapter to arrive to review this device, because really, it's really cool. So, let's go see the device in action, and we'll come back to sum it up. Now, as you can see, there are specific options here. We can move with these keys up and down. On the file manager, there are a lot of ROMs in here, so we're gonna have to be a little patient for it to read all the subdirectories I have inside. Okay, there we go. You go up and down with this. Okay, and back. You get to choose a game. Let's say oh, I can never choose one, can I? Okay, something a little bit there. You press this, it's asking you, should I mount it? You say yes, and now it's mounted. You reset the system, and it starts reading the disk. You can see that it has loaded the program cracked by the burglar. It's fairly easy to use. And very fast as well. Now, the black and white image, I explained it at the beginning. I will make an insert, a small, video to show you the results when I'll get the color input peripheral, just to show you the difference. So, once we reset the computer, it reloads the last image we had inserted. Now we're going to show you what to do in order to load a different image. Now, if you want to load a different image, what you do is get here, back, disk 2, forward, and unmount image. There. Then you go back to the file manager, you choose, you wait. How long will it take? It really depends on how many games you have in the card. in the SD card. In our case, a lot. So we go down. All right. Let's do this. Mounting, yes. Resetting. And there you go. Considering the system's age, we're talking about a machine of 1978. This specific model is, if I remember, 1982 or 1979. It's fairly simple and really fast, I would consider it. Especially when running a game from 1986, as you can see here. And our Armageddon is here. So, this is the basic functions of the interface. And as you can see, easy to use and very fast. Now let's go sum up our findings. Now, as you could see, this device is truly excellent. It simplifies everything. The functions of the device are fairly simple. There's just 4 buttons to use and they're not overly complicated. You also have the screen here that informs you of all the functions. We saw that up close at the beginning of the presentation. Of course, if you have a disk drive collection, you will need to get an adapter to connect it to the floppy drive input, because the way I've used the device, the floppy drive is practically useless right now. It's not connected to the mainboard. But that's something for you to decide. This is a device worth having. It's wonderfully made, and I definitely recommend it to any Apple II aficionado. And as usual, this is a thumbs up from us. And see you on the next hardware review. Once again, we open the DOS vault and we find in it Rex. Now, this is a game that the older of you will know. It's an old ZX Spectrum game that was quite successful back in 1988. It had wonderful graphics and animation, and it was action-packed. Now, Langford Productions bring it to our PCs in a remake that still respects the original's pixel art graphics, animation and style, whilst at the same time feeling fresh. Now you play as Rex, the thick-skinned mercenary, and he's here to do a job. He's come to Zenith to do away with the humans that have built their fortunes around the Great Tower. That's the story straight from the creator's website. Now, the game packs some really wonderful pixel art graphics that are reminiscent of the ZX Spectrum days, but of course without the limited palette and the color clash problems. The animation is wonderful, and like I said, it still respects the original, but has this wonderful retro feeling. The controls are fairly simple, and Rex is easy to control and handle, even mid-jump in the air. You have your trusty weapon. You can utilize these bubbles you collect as shields until they run out, and you can always collect more. You also have almighty bombs that wipe out every enemy on the screen, but these are limited and need to be replenished. The sound effects and the music is also very high standards. The controls, as I mentioned, are very good, responsive, and the collision detection is spot on with no unfair deaths. The gameplay is addictive, and Rex remains one of the most action-packed and wonderfully made action games of the retro years, and it still stands to this day against any other modern outing. Now, let's go on with the ranking, and the graphics receive a 9.2. The controls a 9. The music and sound effects a 9.1. And the gameplay a 9 as well, for a total of 9.1. Rex is an amazing action game that will keep you entertained and occupied for quite a while. It's a wonderful remake that respects the original while speaking to the retro gamer inside us. Definitely give it a go. Our DOS Vault Retrospect today has a holy game, a forefather of one of the most popular game genres today. This is Catacomb 3D by id Software, the precursor to most FPS games. Even though it wasn't the first 3D game by id Software, that honor goes to Hovertank 3D. Hovertank was quite primitive and had little to do with what followed, whilst Catacomb 3D is basically the beginning of the engine that evolved into the first id Tech engine. Now, in this you play as a wizard that must delve into the evil dark mage's catacombs and destroy him. Not much in the way of story, I know, but remember, this is a game that came out early 1991, or rather late 1991, November, and there were no FPSs to speak of. The game was a technical marvel at the time. It was, of course, published through Softdisk under the Gamer's Edge label. It was a series of products that were distributed through magazines. Now, as you can see, the graphics have not aged that well, although they don't look that bad. I mean, I've seen FPSs of a later date that looked much worse. The main problem with replaying the game today is, of course, the controls. The game does not support the classic way of controlling an FPS. You use a combination of keyboard and mouse, although that doesn't work that well, so I recommend using the arrows and the Alt Control combination. The character moves kinda slow by today's standards again, and it is kinda hard to walk through the rooms in the various catacombs. There's no variety of weapons to speak of, but you do have a spell that gets empowered by collecting various spheres. You can also overcharge it with a nuke mode, as it is called, that fires a spread shot. The music is quite repetitive and does get annoying after a while. The sound effects are satisfactory. But we're missing the point here. This is the precursor to almost every FPS game out there, and as such, we should see it from that prism. And from that prism, this is a very important game. Now, on to the rankings, and the graphics, again for the time, was 9.4. The controls receive a 7. The music and sound effects a 7.5. And the gameplay, for its importance in video gaming history, will receive a 9.5. All for a total of 8.3. Catacomb 3D may not look like much today, but it was so important that it's standing up there as the forefather of one of the most popular genres, the FPS. You should really try it, if for nothing else, for historical reasons. Welcome to this week's Retro Adventures, and we begin our review with Aiken by Hadrosaurus Software. This is a classic graphical text adventure game of the old days. It's going to remind you the Sierra Online early games like King's Quest, especially King's Quest 3. I must say that it did remind me of the atmosphere of that game, but without the tedious tests by Mananan that always ended up with you dead or transformed into something hideous. Now, the game in its core is a horror adventure in a very unsettling otherworld. You have no idea who you are or where you are, and you're trying to solve this mystery by discovering clues and exploring the creepy areas. The game utilizes an early SGI engine, but the graphics are very well drawn and they create a very, very spooky atmosphere. I must warn you here that this game is not for minors because of graphical depictions of violence and very disturbing themes. Now, the user interface is based on the classic Sierra games, so there's nothing really special or different about it. Of course, you will need to input text, so the game needs you to familiarize yourself with the vocabulary that it understands. It's not very extensive, but it's not too limited either. There is limited music in-game, and that only for functioning purposes. The puzzles of the game are pretty logical, I would say, and they are what you would expect from a graphic text adventure of that era. The era that the game emulates, at least. You need to discover your environment very carefully, look around for clues or objects that might appear useful to you, combine them or use them in the right place in order to advance in the game and solve the mystery. You move your character around the environment with the arrow keys and you can type in commands at any given moment. Now, on to the rankings for the game, and the graphics receive an 8.9. The puzzles of the game receive an 8.5. The music and sound effects a 6. And controls and gameplay a 9. For a total of 8.1. The Aiken is an excellent graphical text adventure, horror-themed and with a good mystery to solve. Its dark and airy world will drag you in, and you will have a lot of great and interesting puzzles to solve. If you enjoyed the Sierra games of that period, like King's Quest or the early Police Quest games, this is the game for you. You should definitely give it a go.
Well, it all started on Scab Island. Some of my admirers.
Very few fans of the adventure games don't know our Retrospect game today. This is Monkey Island 2 by the legendary game designer Ron Gilbert and LucasArts. Sequel to the mega hit The Secret of Monkey Island, you play once again as Guybrush Threepwood, finding himself on Scab Island and looking for the legendary treasure of Big Whoop. Soon he meets a new bully in the face of Largo Legrand, and things snowball from there until a showdown once again with the presumed dead ghost pirate LeChuck, Guybrush's nemesis. This is one of the funniest and well-made adventure games that ever came out from LucasArts. For some people, this game, along with the Space Quest series, are the best comedies you can play in the form of an adventure game, and I am one of those people. The game is hilarious, the puzzles are funny, and irrational only up to the point where they make you laugh, but nothing too weird to have your head banging against the wall. The game utilizes a very improved version of the Scum engine, and for the first time in a LucasArts adventure game, we see 256 colors. The graphics are so beautifully drawn that they look like a comic book coming to life. All the characters are funny and interesting. The music of the game is also amazing and is now considered a classic theme. The Scum engine and its user interface is very intuitive and very easy to use, even to people that never played an adventure game before.
Got those traveler's checks.
There is also a Toki, as it's called, a version with full speech along with the text, and I recommend that you track this one down, as the voiceovers are simply amazing and they add to the comedy.
Yes. Hi there.
The areas you visit are so beautifully drawn and so majestic sometimes that, besides the comedy, you get to enjoy various areas that resemble paintings. Especially areas like the swamp and the Voodoo Lady's lair are truly amazing. This is a game that became classic the moment it came out, and it's one of the fan favorite even to this day. On to the rankings now, and the graphics receive a whopping 9.7. The puzzles of the game receive a 9.1.
That doesn't seem to work.
The music and sound effects a 9.2. And the controls and the gameplay a 9.1. For a total of 9.3. Monkey Island 2 is not only a worthy sequel to a classic adventure game, but it is perhaps one of the best adventure games that ever came out, probably the best game that LucasArts ever created, and, like we said, a fan favorite that if you didn't have the chance to play it back in the day, you should start right now.
How's business?
Believe us when we say you will enjoy it.
Many hexes this week saved many people from the evil eye, made many pieces of 8, although Largo took most of them.
Tell me about this large...
Aiming high is a good thing. Trip Hawkins, though, aimed for the moon and blew it up. This is the story of one of video gaming history's most notorious failures. This is the story of the 3DO console. Trip Hawkins was always a visionary. Born and raised in California, Pasadena, Trip was once the director of strategy and marketing at Apple, a position he left behind to become the founder of the world's probably best-known video game publisher, Electronic Arts. Under his guidance, EA grew to become a market leader, and after achieving a strategic win by convincing the legendary NFL player John Madden To sign up as a spokesperson and consultant for anything related to American football the company would produce. This deal led to the creation of one of the first NFL video game franchises, Madden NFL, and established EA as the go-to company for sports games. Not the type of person to act within limits, Trip Hawkins found Nintendo's policies for licensing and publishing video games too strict and controlling. Sega, on the other hand, was a like-minded company with its edgy commercials and the daring and experimental attitude. Thus, a relationship between the two companies was formed after EA reverse-engineered the Sega Genesis instead of acquiring a license. Sega admired his bravado and also feared that if they sued him and denied his company cooperation, he could turn to Nintendo, taking with him sports licenses. EA not only got the deal, but at a reduced price as well. That mutually beneficiary relationship catapulted EA's profits and helped Sega Genesis establish itself as the go-to console for the best sports games. But Tripp was not a man to sit on his laurels. He was still unsatisfied with the way the video game industry did business. EA was still publishing games for other formats, such as the rising in popularity PC platform, the Atari and Amiga formats, and even the Nintendo consoles, albeit not the popular sports games. But each time they had to make a new game, they had to make it for all sorts of different systems, all with their quirks and difficulties, and sometimes in different storage medium. This, according to Tripp, was the Achilles heel for the video game industry that wouldn't allow it to become all it could. Hawkins was admiring particularly the attempt the Japanese did half a decade earlier to create a unified format under the MSX standard. He believed that the video games industry would benefit greatly from such a move, and he decided he would be the one to do it. Tripp created a special division within EA named 3DO, an abbreviation of the phrase three-dimensional optics, and got in contact with two old acquaintances of his that could definitely help to lead the project. These two people were R.J. Mikal and Dave Needle, the legendary creators of Atari Lynx and, most importantly, co-creators along with Jay Miner of the Amiga computer. These two like-minded people already had a project on their mind that they designed on a napkin during one of their body talks almost 3 years earlier. Just like the Amiga computer, that system was way ahead of its time and would blow anything the competition could offer out of the water. It would be CD-based, even though the CD-ROM format was just picking up on the industry and with mixed results if one was to take Sega CD into account. Tripp took over as CEO at 3DO at this point, whilst maintaining his position as chairman of EA only. The most important part of the strategy for Tripp, though, was the licensing model. Both Sega and Nintendo demanded a hefty amount for every game license they provided, with Nintendo especially imposing heavy rules to give the okay for publishing a game. Tripp suggested a price for game license that was set at $3, an extremely low price, and combined it with a small royalty from every console made. You see, Hawkins' secret console project would not be made by EA itself. EA, being a video games publisher and developer, did not have the manufacturing means to do so, and an investment in factory infrastructure or a deal with an external manufacturer would be too big a risk and would never get the okay from the board. Instead, the 3DO company would set the console standards to be followed, much like CD-ROM's Red Book, set the licensing model to be applied, and collect profits from the actual manufacturers. With the hardware designs finalized by Mikal and Needle, the licensing model was decided upon, and the name of the company given to the console standard, the 3DO console, was about to hit the market. EA made a prototype model to present at the Windows CES 1993 and made all jaws drop to the ground. There was nothing like it at the time, and the 3DO console exceeded any and all expectations the press might have. The 3DO was equipped with an ARM60 32-bit RISC custom CPU running at 12.5 MHz, 2 MB of RAM, 1 MB of video RAM, and had 32 KB SRAM for save game storage. The graphics capabilities were out of this world for 1993. The system could display resolutions of 640 to 480, 320 to 240, 768 by 576, and 384 by 288, all of them at 60 Hz, and with a palette of 16-bit color, aka 65,536 colors on screen, or 24-bit true color, meaning 16,777,216 colors on screen. It also came equipped with Dolby Surround stereo sound at 44.1 kHz, with a 16-bit DSP and 13 DMA channels of digital input. The medium of choice was, of course, a CD-ROM unit, with double speed at 300 KB per second. Finally, the system came with a multitasking 32-bit operating system for the main graphical user interface. As for connectivity to the outer world, you could connect the 3DO to a monitor or TV through RF signal, composite RCA, and even Super Video. Of particular interest was the design of the controllers. Simple in the premise as far as the keys and crosspad go, the controller had a unique feature concerning the ability to play multiplayer games. You could connect a second controller on a port to your first controller, and from there to the second, and so on, daisy-chaining this way up to 8 different controllers without the need for extra ports on the console or multi-tap devices. There were also announcements for a mouse and a light gun, amongst other peripherals that would become available at a later date. With that phase complete, now Tripp had to secure the members of the 3DO consortium that would bring the console to public. He approached first the companies that had a close relationship with EA at the time. These were Sega and Sony. Sega gave the 3DO serious consideration and even engaged in detailed talks with Hawkins. But since the company was already spread thin with the 32X and Mega CD, not to mention the upcoming but top secret at the time Saturn, decided that it would be too big a risk financially to invest in even one more console. Sony, on the other hand, found the concept intriguing, but at the time the company was already too far in with the development of their own console, the PlayStation, so they decided to deny. The first company to sign up for the 3DO was Panasonic. The Japanese tech giant owned by Matsushita Incorporated saw the 3DO as an opportunity to expand to the profitable video game market that eluded the company so far, and the 3DO was the perfect vehicle to do so. 2 more companies followed suit a while later: Goldstar, today's LG company, and Sanyo. There were other companies that signed up but never produced anything beyond a prototype. Companies like Samsung, Toshiba, and even AT&T. The first 3DO console to arrive on the market was the Panasonic FZ1, and the 3DO licensing model started showing dents on the armor already. leaving the retail price to the hands of the manufacturer, as such was the 3DO license dictated, led to the companies evaluating the console based on its, it was true, expensive technology. The 3DO company may have made a profit by selling the console's rights, but the companies that were making the consoles had to make a profit as well, right? The 3DO license model did not allow the manufacturers to work on a loss, like Sony, Nintendo and Sega did, whilst waiting to make money out of the game sales, since the license profit part for the games went to 3DO, not to Panasonic or Goldstar. Thus, the companies put a hefty price tag on the consoles that went as high as $699 initial price, equivalent to today's humongous price of $1,567, way too much for a video game console. That retail price placed the 3DO into the niche category the moment it hit the market, and from there it was an uphill struggle. Soon the Panasonic FZ10 was introduced a year later, and by replacing the slide CD-ROM mechanism with a top-loading plastic cover model, and reducing the motherboard's chipset and the entire size of the console, it managed to drop the price to as low as $299. The initial Goldstar model, GDO101M, was also redesigned into the smaller and similarly with a simpler CD-ROM loading mechanism, GDO202 model. Sony, on the other hand, released and remained in the market only with the IMP21J Tri model, albeit never leaving the Japanese source and only in limited numbers. And what about the games and the technological edge the 3DO had? Well, the initial enthusiasm about the games soon gave its place to skepticism. Although there were some really good games on the platform, like Road Rash, The Need for Speed, that was born in the 3DO, and some pretty amazing ports of popular arcades like the Street Fighter II Turbo, with a 3DO version considered as the definitive by many, and Samurai Showdown to name a few, there were an incredible amount of mediocre or downright horrible games, mostly FMVs, and on-rail shooters that tried to ride on the full-motion video craze. Many of the hit games of 3DO soon found their way into the other systems with far better results, and it didn't help that the 3DO came just when the dawn of the FPS genre took place. Even though Wolfenstein 3D enjoyed a very good port, the immensely popular, genre-defining Doom had a pretty mediocre one, not helping the system's cutting-edge look. Soon the competition arrived, and things took a turn for the worse. Atari launched the Jaguar, a 64-bit console that, even though it fared much worse than the 3DO, it did bring more pressure with it. Commodore launched the Amiga CD32, a very good CD-ROM console that seemed to be on its way to becoming a hit. But the untimely collapse of Commodore took it out of the market too soon. That, instead of relieving the pressure from 3DO, had the opposite effect. In a market that seemed to be on its way to become saturated with dubious consoles, the consumers decided to play it safe and stick with the 16-bit generation until the big boys made their offering. And that they did. Nintendo announced the Project 64, later Ultra 64, that would eventually become the Nintendo 64. And even though it was still 2 years away, this was Nintendo, and many people were willing to wait for it. Sega launched in a surprise attack the Sega Saturn, that even though ended up being the company's biggest mistake, it was leaps and bounds ahead of 3DO, and from a company people still trusted. It also didn't help the system the fact that, following Trip Hawkins' rebel style and belief in video games for all motto, The system didn't include neither a regional or a copy protection lock, making the console CDs easy to pirate and distribute freely. But the final nail in 3DO's coffin was the launch of PlayStation.
A spokesperson for SAPS, Society
Sony brought the PS1 to the market at the unbeatable price of $299, and with an actual and powerful 3D graphics processor, rendered the 3DO obsolete in a minute.
like a harmless bagel toaster.
You see, even though the 3DO was a very capable and impressive machine, and it had 3D in its name, the consoles did not include any form of an actual 3D processor, and all the 3D graphics one could see in the games were just pre-rendered.
And enter another world.
There were some late hours attempts to invigorate interest in the 3DO model. Creative Labs brought out the 3DO Blaster, a PC ISA expansion card that provides a Windows-based PC with the ability to load and play 3DO games. That move also backfired, as that took away the necessity to buy an actual 3DO console, plus the card was way too expensive to buy, only to play a handful of good games. During the late days of the format, there was revealed that Trip Hawkins and his company already had in the works the M2, the second generation of the 3DO standard. It was going to be a behemoth of specifications, with a dual 66 MHz PowerPC processor, 8 MB of RAM, 32-channel sound, and an extremely powerful 3D graphics processor. But the damage inflicted to the 3DO company from the console's failure meant that trust was lost in the format. Trip sold the M2 standards right to Panasonic, that intended initially to release a console based on them, but eventually cancelled the project and outsourced it as an industrial system capable of custom multimedia applications. And this was the end of the tormented 3DO consortium. The 3DO was one of the first CD-ROM-based consoles on the market that also had characteristics of the rising in popularity multimedia standard. Trip Hawkins had no doubt a very interesting and friendly vision for the industry, but the terribly implemented licensing model and the fact that the pricing of the systems was off his hands led to the downfall of the 3DO and to one of video gaming history's biggest what-ifs.
50 times the performance.